Good afternoon, everybody. We just hit noon on January 31st. So there's a few folks who are still joining, and just from the ease of me being able to admit them in if they're outside of the Maryland domain, we'll focus on getting people in, and then we'll start shortly. All right, we'll give a few more moments here, but as always, just a reminder for everybody, this is kind of an informal conversation, informal, uh, way to transmit information and ask questions. So we'll treat it like that. Feel free to pop on your camera or microphone and jump in as you see fit. Um, we'll go from there. All right, and looks like the pace of people entering has slowed down to manageable, so we can get started. Thanks for joining, everybody, for our quarterly office hours. This one was actually had planned to be in December of 23, but things got busy. Life got in the way, so here we are, January 24. Hope that's okay with everybody. We're recording this today so that we can put it up on the recording on YouTube later. So if anybody wants to refer back to it or have questions, you're more than welcome to do that. Um, let's housekeeping, general things. As I mentioned, these are quarterly office hours. The idea started back with lots of changes in small pond issues, but this is also developing into there's a lot of dam things that are going on too. So we'll be talking a lot about those this afternoon. Um, Objectives here, is again to have a free and fairly informal exchange of information, provide insight to new things that are happening, feedback, and ask questions about processes or policies, and develop a kind of a consistent, unified uh, dam safety group throughout the state. All right, ground rules, same as most times we've had. Uh, like I said, feel free to use the raise hand if you want to jump in, or to be perfectly honest, with a small group we have here today, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question. As always, if you got like a very specific, like I'm reviewing so and so's pond on so and so property, uh, that kind of more detailed question is probably left better to a one-on-one phone call. Open communication is appreciated. Haven't ever had too many disagreements here, but let's keep it professional. A new comment, I guess I'll say here, I'm adding to these ground rules today is there are a couple pieces of legislation pending in front of the General Assembly this year related to dams and small ponds. I will briefly describe what they are, but beyond that, I'm not going to comment on pending legislation or potential legislation or anything like that. The two pieces of legislation that I'm aware are out there. One of them is the MDE Omnibus Bill, House Bill 245. What's pertinent for the community here to know is that that does three things for dam safety in Maryland. It authorizes us to collect annual dam owner registration fees, I believe is what it's called. Authorizes us to collect specific fees for project permitting. And this the fees will then feed into a private dam owner loan type fund. So that could be used, administered by the department to provide loans to private dam owners to help get their dams fixed. So the fees would go right back into helping everybody out. That's HB 245. The other one, Senate Bill 196, 169, something like that, I forget exactly, is a bill introduced by, I think, or sponsored by Department of Agriculture, MASCD, and that authorizes Soil Conservation District to charge fees for small pond reviews. There's one other piece of legislation that I thought might hit this year, but I think the bill filing deadline is passed, so perhaps that didn't get off the ground. Anyways, that is the brief synopsis of the bills. You can find more on the Maryland Legislature's website, and as I mentioned, we'll refrain from any other opinions or commentary about the bills, or opining on what the regulatory implementation aspects of those bills would be if they come to pass. All right, so I've got a couple announcement slides here. I think we've got some good news for a lot of folks out there. As I did mention, a lot of this pertains more so to dams and small ponds, but I think it's still important information to share. The first is that the probable maximum precipitation results in the probable maximum flood. For those of you who use it maybe for dam breach analysis or for high and significant hazard design, that has been determined through hydrometeorological reports, HMR 5152, published by the National Weather Service in the early 1970s. So the data set that it looked at is fairly dated. It provides a fairly high, take that back, low resolution kind of understanding of rainfall depths and distributions. And there is always what they call the stippled area on the Appalachian Ridge, where they admit that terrain and other effects could affect the actual PMP value. So 50-plus-year-old data and scientific analyses have, it's come time to bring that information into the current century. So we obtained funding and have now largely completed a state-specific probable maximum precipitation study. We received some final debrief on that last Friday, and we are awaiting the final report for final reviews and then rolling that out. So this is good news. The methodologies to compute the new PMP is largely the same big picture methodologies as was put into HMR 5152. However, with modern technology, modern computing power, and modern understanding of weather patterns, and also a larger subset of modern storms to account for this. So this will be very interesting information and very useful for people to have when we release it. So that's coming soon. Second, I think really good and important information for people to be aware of is that late last year, we wrapped up our grant-funded inundation mapping project, where we mapped approximately 540 of the inventory dams in Maryland. Those that were not mapped are inventory dams, but they're extremely small or potentially breached. where the breach flow would largely stay within the banks anyways. Think like a run-of-the-river, very old mill dam. So we ran breach analyses, both for a sunny day normal pool condition and for a brimful condition, using a web application called DSS-WISE, supported by the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. It uses 2D flow modeling, like you might find in current models of HEC-RAS, high-resolution terrain data, and it is a somewhat simplified hydraulic and hydrologic analysis, though. So it's not accounting for additional stream inflows and things like that. But it will provide a data set now to the public, to decision makers and local governments for policy development, zoning, planning and zoning, emergency managers to help aid with planning, and a whole host of other information. So that's complete, and we're going to be hosting that on a web app, which development is well underway, but is not yet complete. And actually, I can give a little demonstration of that as we speak here. So this is a beta version of the web app. What you'll see when you log in is kind of just an informational screen that talks about the limitations of the data use and whatnot. And then we have our Maryland dam inventory showing up, right? You can look at the layers we have. We'll also have a Maryland small pond inventory. This is going to be always kind of an underdevelopment pond inventory, but that will be helpful to see where ponds are, and that will become populated with pond information specifics, more so than just locations, as time goes on. You can see we've just got a small subset of the ponds, a really small subset, honestly, of the ponds active on this beta version right now. We'll have property data information, parcels and building footprints, stream data information, cold water resources. That's a hot topic we've been talking about. This is a beta, so actually not all the layers are showing up. Information about transportation that we use, all the critical infrastructure that's out there, hospitals, fire stations, prisons, military, airport, wastewater, power. We'll be able to look at weather, precipitation information, geology, land use, land cover, floodplain, effective and preliminary FEMA floodplains. And then here's the fun part. Let me zoom in here, maybe to Germantown area. And don't fail me now. There we go. All right. So we'll have inundation extents for all of these dams. And as you can see, there's some that overlap here. But this will be a valuable tool, right? So if you're in this community and you want to know, is your house or your place of business or anything else potentially impacted by a dam breach? If you are a government employee and you're reviewing a new development in an area, all of this stuff can be very valuable to understand, where the water might be going and how it could affect people. So this will all be publicly available. This is, I think, the goal is to make this data set and this web app a very kind of a one-stop shop in a lot of ways to provide people with pertinent dam information. And then all the wraparound stuff too to help your decision making. You'll be able to adjust the base maps, and there's filtering, and you can add other GIS data, make measurements and things like that. So it's a pretty neat tool. I think people will find it valuable. So that is under development, and we're just moving a couple more balls forward before we get it kind of blessed to go live. But that's probably in the spring sometime. Yeah, Phil.
Hey there. I was just wondering, I just looked up my neighborhood and saw that I'm being clipped by a double inundation extent in Rock Creek area. So how does the public notification process, how do you see that working? This is sort of, analogous to the new FEMA floodplain mapping, I guess.
when you say public notice, I guess like letting them know that they would be in a dam inundation zone. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, is there an obligation in terms of, you know, statutes or otherwise for you all to let people know about this, you know, new effort and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So there's no regulatory or you know policy mandate that we let people know that they're in an inundation zone. And again, you know, there are caveats that apply to this data. So you know, it's it is a nuanced understanding, right, of you know of what storm events and what would precipitate a failure. You know, there's a dam could fail, and even though it shows here on this mapping tool that you're in the inundation extents, if the storm event that caused the failure doesn't, you know, match up with the assumed storm event for the breach modeling, then you know you may see impacts or may not. So we do not intend, from a dam safety perspective, to at this point in time do outreach to folks. However, that being said, part of the value and value proposition to get the hazard mitigation grant for this lies within our NFIP, National Floodplain Insurance Program, and FEMA goals overall to increase flood insurance policies. So, you know, how we sit literally next to each other, our state NFIP coordinator and myself, and actually Charlie Wallace from the Inspections and Compliance Division, we sandwich them in. So we're in close communication. But FEMA does have a goal to increase insurance policies. And part of that, you know, how and increase the understanding of awareness of flood risks. So part of what this data will help, we think, is as the flood insurance people do outreach, is identifying those properties that are kind of fall between the cracks, right? You're outside of a FEMA flood zone, but you are within a dam break inundation zone. So you actually would qualify for you know, the federally backed flood insurance policies. And because you're outside of the FEMA 100-year flood zone, my understanding is that you know, the cost of the policy is significantly reduced than if you were inside of it. So we can add some protection, and there'll be a lot of outreach. And we also kind of hope that, you know, as we spread the information on the data, that, you know, the universe of people who are sharing this information and letting people know increases as well, right? So whether it's your local emergency managements as they prepare hazard mitigation plans, again, whether it's local governments as they're doing like plan review, you know, development review and things like that. I think it's important for the community to understand these potential risks and recognize that, you know, we're all collectively trying to mitigate the risks of dam failure, and hopefully it does not ever happen and impact the community. But you know, I think the previous, you know, postures of we couldn't share this information because of Homeland Security concerns, you know, I think that maybe doesn't vet out anymore. And very few states are sharing this information at this time. There is a push nationally to get, you know, this information more aware for people. But you know, I know South Carolina has a very similar web app. We might be one of the first, you know, first 5 or half a dozen states to put this information out there. So I think it'll be interesting, you know, to see how it spreads. But this tool will be out again, like I said, full version, probably sometime later in this spring. So, and then we'll do some outreach and training for it as well. All right, other information that's useful to know, and actually I probably need to follow up with Howard County on this, relates to cold water resource areas. And this is like late breaking, really emails, you know, that happened to have a conversation start yesterday, to be honest. Traditionally, in a cold water resource area, you know, we have directed the applicants to do outreach to DNR environmental review, and have them weigh in on the design and see if there's protective elements to, you know, protect or enhance the thermal regime of the downstream of a stormwater pond, let's say, or a farm pond or a dam. We're, without saying too much, because this is, like I said, this is still kind of an email that just, dialogue that's happening as of yesterday. We're looking to streamline that. I think we're going to take some steps to streamline that review process, which will help get answers to small pond reviewers and developers a lot quicker. So excited to see where that leads, but it is still, literally just happening, in the past 48 hours. So the conversations are starting. So I'm sure we'll be sharing more about that soon. Let's see here. Just as an update from folks, I think the last time we did one of our office hours was in September of 23. Like I mentioned, we were going to do one in December, and that's what's happening today. So this map here shows the conservation districts who, at least I'm aware of, who are doing small pond review and approvals. If you are doing that and you're not shown in blue on this map, blue being the ones who are, red being the ones who are not, please let me know. But I think the notable changes from September is the addition of Baltimore County and Cecil County. I don't believe either of those were fully up and running in September of 23, but they are now. So that's good news. It's very good news. All right. This is just a reminder here of the guidelines and policy memos that we put out that are really clarifying, modifying sometimes as needed to be consistent or to take away ambiguity with Pond Code 378. So want to remind folks that we're, everybody should become familiar with these and be applying them in the review. Some of them, as we've discussed before, are, written because there was a question and they shouldn't really even have to be written, right? Like use of NOAA Atlas 14. Well, that's kind of been the expectation from a 378 perspective since, for over a decade. But it came to a head in a couple of reviews where local stormwater review agencies, where they're still accepting the old TP40, in accordance with the Stormwater Design Manual. It does require, in those cases, sometimes developers and engineers to do the two analyses, one for each rainfall depth and distribution. Again, it's not new policy, but it was just reinforcing because there was a disconnect. So that's what's out there right now as it stands. And you might have the question of what's coming. So the first item on that previous slide was the dam breach analysis and hazard classification. We released that in May 2018 as a draft. Have accepted comments over time from it, and really it's time to take those comments, fold them back in, along with some of the other work we've done in the interim, and release that as a 2024. I'll call it a final version, but we're always open to making smart changes to these documents as needed. So that's probably coming again this calendar year. We've also had released a design review checklist a while back. It was hastily put together from a couple different sources. Let me put it that way. And this design review checklist, I've said this before to folks, and I'll make it very clear. Design review checklist is a job aid. It's not meant to replace regulations and criteria. It's not meant to say that if you check every single box there, your design is 100% approvable. It's a job aid that helps build consistency for everybody. But like I mentioned, it's hastily put together. So we've been working on overhauling that quite a bit internally. We're getting close to being done, and we look forward to releasing that soon. so that everybody gets a better, a better shot at efficient reviews and designs. And part of what we're doing in that document is putting a lot of hyperlinks in there. So if we're saying, design the filter diaphragm in accordance with certain NRCS criteria, well, then we're hyperlinking the NRCS criteria right there too. So, again, adding a little bit of value for folks. We've got a couple policy memos that are, in various stages of development and review, from, I'll say, 85% done to 5% started. And they're kind of in order here. So one of them that's probably coming out sooner is talking about small pond exemptions. This policy memo is really brought about by the 2023 update to NRCS 378 for Maryland, right? And as we've probably discussed before, is that regulations specifically cite the 2000 version of 378, and that's the one that has actual effect. But with the new document out there, there is potential for confusion, and the new document doesn't discuss what type of pond would be exempt from needing small pond approvals. The traditional, if it's excavated, if it's less than 4 feet high, or less than 6 feet and 40,000 cubic feet. So this is kind of filling that void, kind of reaffirming what is exempt. But we're taking a second step here and really thinking hard about the changing pond design and pond functions that we see nowadays versus in 2000 when the pond code was written. And one of those is the increasing prevalence of designs that incorporate infiltration media, right? And how sometimes, depending on how you interpret the exemption criteria, that those small, infiltration facilities can get kicked into needing small pond review and approval by virtue of how that infiltration media is constructed. So we're trying to address that. I think at the end of the day, it will probably mean that more of them can be exempt from approval. Obviously, there's some degree of, it has to be reasonable, but I think we're capturing potentially too many things unintentionally. So that's closest to being done. I know Prince George's County has been putting out, or is about to put out, some information about geotechnical investigations, and where they're following behind as well. I think we have, Pond Code 378 discusses the need to do soil investigations. I think it's even phrased. It does not provide enough detail, honestly, to be actionable, and therefore I think we've been seeing a lot of designs with zero geotechnical consideration or just very inadequate geotechnical investigations, and that plays into things like making sure your cutoff trench is acceptable and stuff like that. So we're modernizing and clarifying those expectations. A lot further out is some discussions and conversations on design criteria for weir walls. We see basically everything and anything under the sun come in. There's I'd say each design firm who's doing designs kind of has their own different way of doing it. Not saying that they're all wrong or that they're all right, but excuse me, some consistency would be probably beneficial to us all. So this wouldn't be like an overarching, soup to nuts design guidance. It would just provide some high level criteria and expectations. Very far out, I think, is some discussion of what is acceptable for overtopping design. So in those cases where you have an inadequate spillway, and really the last resort is to allow for controlled overtopping of the pond embankment or dam embankment. For most small ponds, that's probably not going to be accepted or allowed. It really comes to like a high hazard dam where you need to pass that large PMF flow. but putting up some guardrails for that. Relatively soon, I need to finish bouncing this around with some folks. We have now termed these certain roadway railroad embankments as super wide embankments, meaning that it's the crest width is incredibly large in relation to the volume of stored water. Risk of failure is considerably lower. And so we've been asked to consider and are actively considering relaxing the complete prohibition on woody vegetation on those embankments. This won't mean you can just allow an unchecked forest to develop. It's kind of a balance, particularly there's a lot of our roadways, tree cover is beneficial, for noise abatement and things like that. And having to clear cut them is kind of contrary to some other, state initiatives and policies. So that's coming. Further down the line, we've prepared on our policy guidance stuff. Put it out here. Let's see, the construction best practices policy memo 15, which was really kind of a very softened way of saying, here's expectations for construction. And, Pond Code 378 specifications are neither specifications nor detailed enough to really ensure adequate quality control, quality assurance for construction. So I'd like to pursue a replacement with actual template specifications to be customized by project, based on the need and the design criteria, but it would actually be more, more implementable, more actionable. For those folks dealing in dams through our office, the memorandum of land restrictions is something that's required when we file a permit. It goes with the land records. Right now, it's a paper process that bounces, paper copies back and forth multiple times to get the right signatures. We have the ability, and legal ability and physical ability to do this electronically moving forward. It's just a matter of implementation and developing the right, internal protocols. So that's a goal for 24 is to have that be a lot more efficient. And then, hey, lastly, if you're a Ravens fan, Sunday was a little tough for us all, but the good news is, 2 weeks away, pitchers and catchers down in Sarasota. So that's good news. All right, so that's kind of the big picture announcements. Got a lot of stuff off the chest there, and we're headed for the upcoming year. So now I'd like to open the floor for questions or comments, and kind of our normal dialogue that we have in these office hours. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa. Yeah.
Hey, John, it's actually Bob Anderson.
Sorry.
I have to log in through my wife's Gmail account, but just a question about when or if there's any guidance or like checklist for when an engineer in charge is required, and what I'm getting a lot of questions from engineers about how they write their proposals for what's required.
That's a really good question. So we're kind of moving towards more having an engineer in charge required for all dam and small, required for all dam projects. And really the way we've written some of the new small pond stuff is that, they're essentially required for small ponds as well. So that way we have some continuity, and part of it really ties back to the need to have an accountable party to get as-built documentation done too. So we don't have, I would say, the best scope. I think you've identified a really good need out there to have an understanding of what the engineer in charge roles and responsibilities are. And it can vary from project to project depending on the project nature. But it in the big picture, it is, having some ability to check in either virtually or through one of your staff members or in person on the construction progress on a weekly basis. What are the major milestones that have been accomplished? collecting, you know, and documenting field conditions, you know, challenges, RFIs, shop drawings, submittals from contractors and things like that. And you know, having all of that there and then kind of a finger on the pulse, I guess, of the project, so that if things are going wayward, you could, you know, work with the owner to step in and make sure it's corrected. With the end goal being that you have that great documentation, so you go to submit your as-built information, and we do have that newer as-built checklist that talks about, you know, it's not just the red line plans, it's some of that construction quality control and normal way of construction paperwork too. So, you know, that's my like big picture viewpoint on it. I think as a starting point, you know, in the absence of anything else right now, you know, the as-built checklist that we do have on our website is probably a good starting point to feed to people, as, you know, help them think about what their scope needs to be during construction so that they can successfully put all the pieces together to provide what's required in that checklist. That might be the best way to approach it right now.
Okay, thanks. That's a good idea. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? The awkward silence is okay, at least for a little bit, as you're thinking about it.
John, getting back to the mapping, I think this is basically a dumb question, but the inundation maps and the notification lists that are in EAPs should basically in all cases be more accurate than what's shown in that web application, you know, that was generated with DSS-Wise. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, yes. So the DSS-Wise stuff is good, is good data, right? It's good mapping, but you know, it's just using a little bit less inputs and variables than like a full HEC-RAS model would be. So, you know, if you're kind of modeling apples to apples scenarios, like and we've done this and we've compared them, you know, if you're looking at the same conditions, you know, like a sunny day, more or less criteria, release the water, your HEC-RAS model and your DSS-Wise model are going to have very good agreement. It's when you start getting like the rainfall events on top of the dam failures that those are the inputs that are lacking in DSS-Wise. So when it comes to like full-on dam breach hazard classification and preparing EAPs, we do want people to use, you know, the traditional HEC-RAS methodology. If, you know, we have a dam that doesn't have an EAP, but we have the DSS-Wise stuff, I'd rather use the DSS-Wise on a short-term basis. So we have the EAP available, and, you know, as that dam owner, you know, figures out how to get the fuller modeling done. But yes, I think that probably kind of answers the question.
Thanks.
Yep. See, I saw one in the chat about, does the engineer in charge need to be the designer? That's a really good question. The answer is a little bit yes and a little bit no. Okay. When it comes to the dam safety permits, in our small pond approvals, we've been naming that engineer in charge in them. So if that changes during the course of the project, you know, from the design phase to the construction phase, we would issue a modification to our approvals reflecting that new person. We recognize that it's not always possible to have that continuity, right, from cradle to grave. It's the ideal, but it's not it's not possible to have the same person. And I saw this next question, and I can talk about that too. So if it has to change, it can change, if it's justified. There is benefit to having that continuity, right? So any design assumptions that were made or the intimacy you develop, understanding the project nuances, if change, let's say, needs to occur during construction, having that continuity, should prevent an incorrect, understanding of assumptions and the nature of the project. Our engineer in charge affidavit that we have, or declaration, I forget if we've changed the title of it, does call for like a single point person, but does also certainly accommodate, and to that comment, the follow on, the design team, right? Whereby it may be a single firm with multiple specialties in the firm, and you list those partners, or maybe you've got subbed out subcontract agreements, so you have a prime designer plus a geotechnical subconsultant or a structural subconsultant, and so on and so forth. So we can acknowledge that concept of having a design team in it, but it's still, in a lot of ways, from a paperwork standpoint and just efficiency standpoint, like having a single point of contact is helpful, and we want that one person, recognizing that if they can always expand to the rest of their design team the discussions, but that way I don't have to know, okay, it's a geotech related question to this project, I've got to reach out to so and so. On the same project, oh, I've got a new H&H question, let me reach out to so and so, right? It helps us keep track of people a little bit easier. All right. Yeah, another one. Clint, yes.
Yeah, John, you mentioned updates to the 2018 guidance for dam breach analysis. Any big ticket items to highlight?
I don't think there's anything big. I think it's no like whole scale, oh wow, are changing our whole processes. It's a lot of the comments we received are a lot of like nuanced, questions about okay, a really specific thing, like let's clarify. There's a lot of feedback we got was, okay, this all sounds good, but I get to this point and I get a little confused, right? Can you help clarify that statement? So that's, I think, really where it's going to be headed towards, is just providing a document that's a little, more polished, and thankfully for review, where we thought it was clear and somebody else didn't, we can make those corrections. But the standard notion we kind of have now of like, can you do a screening analysis, a simplified or a full-on standard analysis, and how we're assessing hazard classification should generally stay the same.
Okay, thank you.
Make sure we got anything in the chats. Hey, Martin, how are you?
I'm doing great, John. I hope you are too.
Thanks. Yeah.
I want to ask a very, I want to ask a very simple question. A real detailed question. It's not, these are bigger people, better people are asking bigger questions. I'm going to ask a real simple one.
What's going to be the hardest?
Okay. On your memos are very helpful. The technical memos. Can I ask a technical question about one of them?
Yes, and I'll do my best to answer.
All right. If I look at the one where I talk about, this is memo number 2, railroad embankment with culvert crossing.
Yep.
Yeah, some of my more inventive engineers are trying to do multiple pipe crossings, and work it out so that adjusting things so that 2 times the headwater works in their favor. And I understand what you've done here, but I need to ask a question. You say anytime there's more than a 1 foot difference. And I remember from when all this started with DNR wanting multiple pipes, one pipe sized to match the bank full on the stream and the other pipes at the level of the floodplain. And I know exactly when this all began because I was there for those discussions. I listened to Dave Roskin talk about that a long time ago now, 20 years, maybe 25 years ago. Did you guys pick that 1 foot number? It says, if they're more than 1 foot apart, you don't do it this way. That counts as a stormwater facility and whatever. If I've got a floodplain that's 2 feet up from the stream invert, and they've put the extra, they followed that what DNR told us to do, and set the higher pipes out on the floodplain. That was the intent of what you're doing here. You're talking about trying to not have somebody put an extra a big pipe down low and then have a little pipe way up in the air and say I'm using twice that height from up in the air and play some silly game like that, right?
Yeah. So the kind of the original notion that you're talking about of having like one in the stream and then some up, elevating the floodplain, that makes a lot of sense. And we did struggle with like, how do you communicate, something like that, which is perfectly appropriate. What we were trying to avoid. So this is, I think this can help you interpret how you apply that policies.
Mm-hmm.
What you mentioned is, and we have seen, some very creative designs where you have, let's say, a 48-inch pipe at the stream invert, and then somewhere way up at the middle of the embankment, there's an 18-inch overflow pipe.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of those cases where it's I don't think you're fooling anybody.
Right.
That's kind of that's a game that people are playing. So we were trying to avoid those kind of creative designs.
There we go. Creative designs. That's a good word. The one I saw was a slot, was a box of, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet tall and 6 inches wide.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Similar types of things. Yeah. Right. So that's.
But as far as that 1 foot thing, that was because that's the DNR deal about an overflow pipe. What you're really talking about is it's okay to do this when you have pipes that are on the floodplain going straight through at the floodplain level. It's not hard and fast 1 foot. It's floodplain pipes and a pipe. You're trying to deal with that DNR design or their design criteria, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that it doesn't have to be hard and fast if the design is trying to really, be what you call the DNR design, right?
Yeah, and I'll ask one more question and I'll get off here. There's other more important people ask questions. Younger, better engineers. Did you ever see that in writing or a drawing from DNR? I've looked for that because I was trying to explain this to somebody when we got into this. Have you ever seen that policy or that thing in an actual document from DNR?
No.
It was all words.
Yeah, I've gone through our files pretty extensively, and the only thing that I can really find that, and I don't know where I'd find it now, but I've seen it, in kind of some of those memorialized conversations. Speaks more about fish passage and the notion of kind of having an embedded pipe, which I think might be a similar but different conversation than what you're talking about. But no, otherwise it might be kind of lost to time and the ethos. those.
Well, I
after-
understand what you're telling us now, and I can follow with that. As long as that 1 foot, I know where that came from.
Yep.
And as long as I can work with that, I know what to do. Right. Thanks, John.
Yep, my pleasure. Yep. Yes, one more question. Yep.
Hey, John, me again. Just curious if you, MDE, has any planned trainings or anything for regards to this or any other possible stormwater topic coming up.
I don't have anything on the dam safety small ponds radar other than these office hours at this time. The stormwater question is very good. I think that ties, into a storm and a lot of potential updates that is happening with that. And I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not fully embedded in that, kind of a storm holistic review team and what they might be preparing. So I don't have an answer for that. I'm sure somebody like Stu Comstock, would have some insight, but if they're, this is one of those things where, we're happy to take suggestions. We can't always make the promises that we can deliver training. But if you have, needs for certain items, please let us know. And if, we have the resources available internally to develop something, we can offer it. We might also be able to point you to, an outside entity who might have similar training, available too. That would typically be for purchase, but we can help maybe steer people in the right direction. It kind of depends on the nature of the training and like I mentioned, our internal resources. Do we have enough staff to cover the basics and develop and implement something? We'd always love to, but it's a balance. As I'm sure everybody's aware, you don't have unlimited resources.
I'm thinking maybe once you get your checklist finalized for reviewing,
Yep.
it would be good to kind of do a training. Just 378 review training would be excellent. Something like that.
Yeah, we can definitely
Go over just different situations and different problems and issues. Especially for people that don't review 378 ponds all the time.
Lost my pen. There we go. I'll write it down. That's a good comment. Maybe we can take even our next quarterly office hours and have that be more of a run through of that checklist, design checklist as well.
Great, thanks.
All right. Well, anything else we should discuss here today? We're open. We don't need to keep the meeting going for any much longer. Let people get back to their normal duties, though. If we've covered it all, as always, you can reach out to us, with questions and things like that. As they come up, we'll do our best to answer them. I will say, I forget exactly when it kicked in, but we changed the layout of our website a little bit. You don't have to scroll as far to get to the really good stuff. And I think that's been beneficial because not everybody was realizing all the good stuff we have there. So, check out the website. It's a wealth of information. We're trying to keep it updated. We will be posting a recording of this on our the YouTube channel we've set up for that kind of stuff. But maybe one last call for any questions or comments, and then we'll, like I said, we'll shut it down for now, and we'll meet back up again sometime when the weather's a little bit warmer, and see what else is new and advancing out there.
John, as always, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Thanks all for attending and asking good questions. And it's always really nice to have these. It's a good team. We're all a good team. All right. Well, I see people are dropping off at a pretty steady clip now. So thanks again for attending. It's hope you all have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. And look forward to talking soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jen.